You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, so great to be back with you again this week. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, and I'm your host, Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams. Once again, thanks to many of you who've reached out to ask how Dana is, and well, she's recovering remarkably well. It seems like it's a three-step procedure, and the first two are out of the way, with the last coming this afternoon if you're listening on the day of release. And she's blooming right now. With the removal of this huge stone, she's had great relief from back pain, which has plagued her, particularly over the last 2 years. Maybe they're connected. Anyway, she's a whole lot better, and thanks for reaching out. And talking of illnesses and the like, our main guest today is a type 1 diabetic who completed a thru hike last year and shares his story with you in a moment. He's DJ Mullet, and I think you're going to be fascinated by how he went about it. Now, I was hoping to share a bit of exciting news with you all. Well, it's exciting to me, but I'm afraid it's been postponed for another couple of weeks. Fear not, though. We still have a great interview with two friends of the show. Many of you know Jester from the Jester Section Hiker podcast on our network. Well, Julie, or Jester, teamed up with Austin Wallace about a year ago to form Jester Wallace Productions. And they very recently released a film called Safe and Found, which is an educational documentary featuring the Haywood County Search and Rescue Team. And the film follows the team, telling stories about what can go wrong in the forest and on trails, as well as how to avoid problems when things do go wrong. I caught up with the two of them, and we'll be hearing from them after DJ. So let's hear from DJ now. Here is DJ Mullet, or Dos Entradas. This week, our guest is another suggested by one of our listeners. This was Renee DeMarche, or Kibble, who wrote to me and introduced me to DJ Mullet, or Dos Entradas. Hey, DJ, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Steve. Good to be here.
Good, I'm glad you're here. And I might as well start with Dos Entradas. So tell us what that is.
Yeah, Dos Entradas. So I did not accept that name for about 100 miles. And I was given that name by my first tramley, a couple that I started hiking with for about, I think, 11 days I hiked with them. And I was trying to come up with this cool name. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I was coming up with all these, what I thought were cool names. So I was trying to get them to call me Orange Crush because I had this nice Hawaiian orange shirt. And I wanted something cool to go with.
And you have a good-sized red beard as well, by the looks of things. Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. And, I was trying to get some cool name like that had something to do with type 1. And they're like, we're not calling you Orange Crush. Like, no, that's not happening. Yeah. But the way Dos Entradas came to be was we got off in Helen, which was like on day 4. Went into town, did a little resupply. And
Helen, is that the town that's made out to be like a German town that is absolutely nothing like a German town? Because I've been in Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the German architecture theme type deal.
That's right, yeah.
Many pubs, and so we questioned which was the pub to hit up, and we were given that and went there. And I was just hungry at this point. I was used to eating like lots of like clean food,
sure,
as being a diabetic. And so I remember specifically I ordered a chicken Caesar salad, and the waitress asked if I wanted a side salad or like a normal salad. And I'm like, a normal salad, give me a normal salad. And then I also ordered a burger and sweet potato fries. And this chicken Caesar salad came out on like one of those very large like dinner plates. It was a meal in itself. And Too Easy in 8th Gear, the couple I was hiking with, they looked at me and they're like, "There's no way you're eating that all." I'm like, okay, bet.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, challenge accepted. And they're both talkers, so like by the time I had everything eaten before they were even done with their food. And they're like, what's the deal? Like, did you like show up to the trail with like hiker hunger or something? And it's like, I don't know, maybe like I was just craving some real food. So every time I went into town, I would do that. And that started it. And then like we went into Hiawassee, which was just like a couple days later, and we had to go into Hiawassee to hit a pharmacy, and did the same thing there. Ordered, wings and a salad and something else. Ate that all.
Does not make you a bad person, by the way. You're totally with your rights to do that on the trail any day you wish, which is even more marvelous.
Yeah. So they're like, you need to be called two entrees. And I'm like, well, that's just too bland of a name. Like, I want a cool name, like a unique name. Like, I get why you're calling me two entrees, but like, it's got to be cooler than that. So in Franklin, did the same thing, went into town, and they made a joke. Too Easy made a joke, and he called me Dos Equis, the beer. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, Dos Equis. Okay, two. And I was like, well, I wonder what entrees is in Spanish. And then so that's how the name kind of came to be. And I was like, oh, Dos Entradas. I was like, that's a cool name. No one's had that trail name before. And I was like, then you guys can just call me Dos for short. And that's a lot of people just call me Dos on trail just because they couldn't pronounce Entradas. let alone did they know what Entradas stood for, So
yeah, I had no idea, I must admit, when you told me that. So it's good to know. Now, you actually hiked the AT this year, and we're actually recording at the end of December. This probably won't come out until early 24, so 2023, and you finished in early October. Mm-hmm. And this obviously is your story. You're a type 1 diabetic, and you obviously mentioned that just now. What exactly is a type 1, particularly as opposed to a type 2? Let's start with that first. What actually is it?
Yeah, so type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where your body, for some reason, attacks itself, and it attacks the cells in your pancreas, which are the beta cells. Your beta cells produce insulin. Insulin is a hormone. And it attacks those cells, it kills all those cells. So your body, for a type 1 diabetic, your body is no longer producing insulin. Right. Insulin's an important hormone because it regulates glucose or sugar in your blood. And under normal circumstances, your body would break down glucose in the cells in your pancreas, and it would turn that sugar into the energy that your body needs to function. Insulin helps glucose in your blood enter your muscle, fat, and liver cells so they can use it for energy or store it for later use.
I'm glad you haven't learned this off by heart, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading this.
Yeah, I can tell. I'm watching you do it, yeah.
I took notes.
Oh, dear, funny.
When glucose enters your cells, the levels in your bloodstream decrease, and it signals your pancreas to stop producing insulin. So without the natural occurring insulin in your body, your sugar just sticks around in your bloodstream because there's nothing to help regulate that influx of sugar in your system. And that can lead to high blood sugar. High blood sugar, especially over an extended period of time, can lead to all kinds of blood-related diseases. And heart diseases, so like heart attack, strokes, anything like that.
So what actually, what is it that starts you having this? Is this one event that happens in your body, or is it something that just naturally occurs in some people and doesn't naturally occur in others?
Yeah. So the way I describe it too is it's kind of like my body is not making enough keys to unlock the doors that are needed.
All right.
And the thing with type 1 is there isn't a proven cure yet. We're in 2023 and there's no proven cure. There's no proven cause root of what causes it. There are some genetic markers that one can get tested for that would show maybe you're a little bit more susceptible to developing type 1, but it's not a proven science. Like there's people that have these markers show up, but like they don't develop it. Whether it's hereditary...
So it's somewhat arbitrary in many ways for you. Yeah. So how does that differentiate itself from type 2?
Yeah, so for a type 2 diabetic, their body is just not producing enough insulin to regulate the sugar that's in their body. So that it can't always be reversed, but a lot of times it can be treated and reversed through diet, through exercise, and the body will kind of re-regulate itself and increase the insulin, I guess, sensitivity for the insulin that their body is making for a type 2 diabetic.
So you were diagnosed. You're now in your late 30s. I think you're just about to pass 38.
Yep.
And you were diagnosed though in your mid 20s. Was there something about your lifestyle at that stage that led you to the diagnosis? And how did you find out? What happens in your body that you suddenly think, oh, this doesn't sound good, and you go and see a doctor and they say, oh, you're diabetic?
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed. I'm 37, almost 38 now. I was diagnosed when I was 25. And for me, my symptoms when I was diagnosed was I felt just super dehydrated, like extremely dehydrated. So I was constantly drinking water. At that time, I love Gatorade. I love, soda. I love, all the things. Sweet tea was one of my favorite things. So I was just drinking lots of all the things, and drinking lots of liquids. When you're not dehydrated, leaves you going to the restroom quite often.
Of course.
I also felt fatigued, and fatigued to the point where I would be at work, I'd sit down at lunch, and I would just stare at my food and not actually eat it. I was fatigued where I'd sit down to eat my lunch and almost fall asleep. And I knew that's not me. I struggle waking up in the morning, but once I'm awake, once I have a cup of coffee, I'm good to go. So I knew something was off. I had lost a lot of weight. That's one, I guess, benefit, if you can call it a benefit. When you have high blood sugar, you actually tend to lose weight.
That's a positive way you're taking it, but yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not a good thing, but that is one thing that happens. And so I had lost a lot of weight, and I just knew something was off. So my dad was dealing with kind of almost being diabetic, flirting with being type 2 diabetic.
All
and
right.
he had a tester, he had test strips and a tester to prick your finger to be able to test your blood to see what your blood sugar was.
Sure.
So after work one day, I tested my blood sugar, and it came back at 532.
What's the number it should have been?
For the normal person, you should be between 90 and 110.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
So that immediately, it was okay, I'm a type 1 diabetic. But when I went to see my family doctor, who didn't have a lot of experience with type 1 diabetes, he was like, well, you're older. I really don't feel it's type 1. I would feel like you're maybe more type 2. So that's kind of how he approached my initial treatment. Gave me the oral generic medication for it. And for about 2 months, I struggled with, I had no control over it. And it was really, really, really hard.
I bet. As a young man taking on something like that must have been quite devastating in many ways, actually, because it appears to, does change people's lives. But were you actually at the time already a hiker or not? In other words, because you wanted to do this for some time, the AT. So
yeah.
What was your thought process at the time? Were you thinking about doing it at that stage?
Yeah, I was definitely a hiker. I got into backpacking back in 2004, 2005 when I was in high school. Coming out of high school is when I really got into backpacking. And so I was a hiker. The crazy thing was I had started changing my lifestyle. So I'd gotten to running. I was running a lot. I was training for a half marathon. And I was watching what I ate. I was trying to eat healthier, eat cleaner. And then, boom, out of nowhere, I'm diagnosed as type 1 diabetic.
So you had a bit of hiking background, but funnily enough, and somewhat coincidentally, you had a boss who has been quite a big part of this podcast for several weeks, quite a few weeks, in fact, and he was actually a guest on the show as well. Tell us who that was.
Yeah, his name was Paul Stutzman, and
great guy. One of my very first books I ever read was Paul's, and I was lucky enough he became a friend as well, and he came to speak at our club in Florida. He was such a nice fella as well. So what was he like to you? Did he see in you a hiker, or did you see in him a hiker and you wanted some of that?
Yeah, I mean, he was always a boss to me. I worked for his restaurant for 5 years while I was going through high school. But he was also close friends with my father, and my father owned a custom cabinetry company. And so I knew Paul fairly well through just interactions that he had with my dad.
Nice.
My dad had got him to actually come speak at our at the company's Christmas banquet the year after he got done with his thru hike. And I knew Paul quit the restaurant. Like, we kind of all knew that, us as employees for the restaurant, but I didn't really realize that he was going and hiking. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing that he was even into. And so I was into backpacking at the time. And then after hearing him speak about the Appalachian Trail, I was like, oh, that would be really, really cool. Like, I want to do that one day. Like
cool. I love the fact that he encouraged you, because I say, reading that book, I'd never had any intention of hiking at all, and I read that book, and it was mind blowing to me. What a really well written book it was. Very soulful and very spiritual. Not that I'm a particularly spiritual person, but I would always recommend that as one of my favourite books of all to read. So, and once you said you liked the idea of that, did he encourage you at all? Did he help you in any way?
Yeah, I had asked him. I was like how do I go about doing this? And he's like, well, like, it's definitely possible to do. Like, you just got to go, like, spend time in the outdoors, like sleep in your tent as much as possible, hike as much as possible, as you're training or whatever. And it was very basic, then, because obviously,
but just do it. As Nike say, just do it. Get off your ass and go and do it. And then you kind of do that. And I know at that stage, soon after that, you eventually worked for your family business, and you'd continue to hike. Was the dream still there?
Yeah, the dream was there. But like, I obviously graduated high school, went into the family business. And, it's just one of those things with life, like, I was just doing the generic thing that's kind of expected of you, to go into the workforce and work hard and put your head down and make money and, do that thing. So.
Happy days.
Yeah.
I think the world lives on that sort of attitude, unfortunately. But then, of course, you got the diagnosis. So did you think at that stage that were your doctors telling you that the chance to hike the AT was over, or was that still strongly in your mind?
No. The thing with the diagnosis, when that happened overnight, my life completely changed. I felt kind of alone in that diagnosis. Being diagnosed as a independent adult at the time, I'll tell everybody it's harder being diagnosed as an adult than as a kid, because as a kid, you have kind of your family around you to help support and kind of take on some of the tensions that come with type 1. As an adult, you're kind of still that kid at heart that wants to chase those crazy dreams, but yet you're also an adult. And the thing with type 1 is, like, we are our own treatment of the disease. And so kind of overnight when that diagnosis hit, I was like, man, like I don't even know how to move forward from this. Like, I had got into working out regularly at that time too. And I was like, I don't even know how to work out. Like, how do I balance like my blood sugar around still being able to like run and like lift weights and all this, let alone do the AT. Like, I felt like that was going to be a thing that was never going to happen anymore. And it wasn't just that; it was a lot of things that mindset kind of carried over into life.
Did you get depressed?
For sure. Yeah. That's a thing with type 1. Like, they talk about burnout a lot, like diabetes burnout, and it's definitely a real thing. Right.
But you and I are talking now. The year you're now a thru hiker, and you've completed, spoiler alert, he did it this year. Yeah. Happy days. So what changed your mind, and why this year? Literally, is it 13, 14 years after diagnosis? Something like that?
Yeah. So 2011, 2023, whatever that math is.
Yeah, I'm a crap at that as well. Yeah. We'll call that 12 then.
Yeah. But I had kind of wanted to do the AT for like 18 years from when I first kind of like heard about it till now when I successfully have done it. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it. Like, the reason why I was out there this year, I just felt like I was meant to be out there this year. There was a lot of things that kind of fell into place. Yeah. I had changed my family doctor 3 years ago now, I guess. And that happened due to a close friend of mine. It's like, hey, like, you might want to do this because there might be some potential that it can save you some money. Because the one thing that no one ever prepares you for as a type 1 diabetic is the financial cost that's associated with it.
It's less so now, though, isn't it? Isn't that changed now?
It is less, but it is still expensive. And that held me back for lots of years, because I just never thought like I felt confident that after having managed and learning how to manage my type 1, that I could do something like the AT, but I just never thought financially I'd be able to afford a through hike plus afford the cost of the supplies that I would need for that through hike. So that held me back for lots of years.
But how did that fall into place then? Because I think you said when we spoke before that your insurance wasn't willing to work with you on this in terms of getting your supplies and getting 6 months supplies. So how did you manage that part of it?
Yeah, so you fight as a type 1 diabetic, you fight insurance like all the time, every year. It feels like something changes. But I did change my family doctor. By changing my family doctor, she has been super supportive of me and like wanted to see me succeed and wanted to see me succeed in the dreams that I had and to chase those dreams. And so by changing my family doctor, what it did was it allowed me to tap into a pharmacy that is attached to the clinic, local here, where I can literally walk in with a prescription in hand and get that prescription filled without even having it run through my individual insurance. They have their own kind of program that they can run prescriptions through, and it gets a huge discount back to me through that program. So that was huge. So you can get 3 months supplies typically filled at any local pharmacy. So I did work with my insurance. I got them to approve 1 extra month. So I got CVS, my local CVS, to fill 4 months supply of supplies. And then I went to the pharmacy attached to my doctor and was able to fill the rest of the supplies that I needed. That way, I had 6 months of supplies on hand, bought and paid for before I stepped foot on the trail this year.
Right. So, and were you doing this? You said you felt it was your year, but were you doing it now because you had diabetes and you wanted to prove something, or were you doing it despite having diabetes? I'm not entirely sure. I'm rereading the question I wrote down. I'm thinking that's not really the same thing. But, is it a case of you want to prove to someone can do this with diabetes, type 1 diabetes?
It's a little of both. When the world shut down back during COVID, that was actually a good thing that happened for me, because what it did was it caused me to slow down and to stop and reflect. And the one thing I had never done was I realized I had never really fully processed the emotional side of the diagnosis with my type 1.
Right.
So there was this side of the hike this year where it was like I wanted to restore my relationship with my type 1. I had gotten into kind of a dark place. I was definitely feeling a lot of burnout with type 1. I was moving towards where I didn't really care about type 1 anymore. Not where I would just like do anything like foolish and stupid, but like I wasn't living with it successfully or managing it successfully. And so I knew I needed to do something. And just my experience with backpacking, I knew that I got really, really great numbers when I went out backpacking. Like my blood sugar was some of the best it had been when just the weekend trips that I would take. So I was like, okay, like this is something that I can actively do. That's going to actually, I knew it would probably benefit my blood sugar. Mm-hmm. And so there was this side of it where like I wanted to repair my relationship with my type 1. I wanted to prove myself that I could do it. And that type 1 didn't get to win. Like it didn't get to control every little aspect of my life.
Had you failed to do it this year, that probably would have precipitated you into a much darker place, I suspect, because it would have beaten you, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Did you consider that along the way?
I never actually really did consider it all. Because I think my approach this year was like if for some reason I get off trail, like I didn't think type 1 was going to get me off trail. Right. I felt like it was going to be injury or something else would get me off trail. Sure. And if that was the case,
and that's fair enough, isn't it? Yeah. That's okay. I get that. That makes much more sense. And I'm a notoriously poor planner, but I suppose you can't be, can you? What do you need to consider before heading out? I know you got your 6 months supply, or is that basically all you need to consider? Or do you have to look at your physical well-being before you go out there as well?
Yeah, so the big thing for me was to have those supplies on hand, paid for that was huge
Sure.
because the cost is significant. So that was huge. That was a big goal. That when that happened, that freed up a big burden to knowing that I would be able to successfully do this with the financial side of it.
Sure.
But as far as prepping for the AT, the one thing I did was, and the one thing I do at home just through training in general is I train through low blood sugar. I train through high blood sugar. So if my blood sugar's low, my blood sugar's high, I train through it all. So yeah, I kind of did as much training as I could where I'd put myself into positions where, okay, my insulin pump fails. Okay, what do I do about that? So I'd like go out and I would hike on weekends and I would purposely like cause some issues like with my insulin pump or like that kind of thing. And then I'd be like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do.
Wow. Do you ever leave it? You never left it at home, did you?
I didn't ever leave it at home, but yeah, like I would hike with high blood sugar. I hiked with low blood sugar. I have an insulin pump that I use, and I wear a pod with that insulin pump. It's the Omnipod 5 insulin pump, and there's a pod that you change every 3 days.
Right.
And so I would purposely like tear off a pod, you know, so I wasn't getting insulin and that kind of thing, and be like, okay, like. So now I know, because for me it was like, okay, like, so if I faced this once before mentally, when I get on trail and something like that were to happen out there, I know I've faced it once before.
Right.
So like, I'm not going to go worst case scenario, and, you know, I'm going to kind of have some kind of, you know, place to move forward from because I've faced it before.
You know, and I was thinking about what you take. I mean, are there any bits of gear, extra bits of gear that you need that I don't, for example? So is there stuff that you need to take that would add to your weight, the weight in your pack, I suppose?
Yeah. So I have the insulin pump. I also have a continuous glucose monitor. I don't, for the diabetics, any diabetics that are listening to this, I would say you don't necessarily need an insulin pump to be successful to hiking, but I would not hike without a continuous glucose monitor. That was huge. I have the Dexcom G6 that I hiked with. So I have, for me, what I carried 5 pods. So those were changed every 3 days. That was for my insulin pump.
Right.
And I had one glucose sensor that I wore on my arm. And then I carried a backup sensor. And then I carried 2 vials of insulin. I carried an insulin pen, so you can get an insulin pen with insulin in it, and that was a long-lasting Lantus insulin pen. Uh-huh. I carried 2 syringes because I had the vials of insulin, so I could take a old school syringe and give myself shots if I needed to. And then I had like adhesive patches to go over my sensor so I wouldn't tear my sensor off.
Right.
I carried a Frio insulin cooling wallet. Frio makes these insulin cooling wallets where you can stick vials of insulin in or insulin pens in. And it's the cool thing about them is they're made for the outdoors. They're made for adventure.
Right.
So you can dip them in any type of water source. So any stream, a sink, really any water source. If it's cool water, you dip it in there and it activates the pouch and it makes it like a cooling pouch. And it also keeps your insulin protected from freezing. Okay. And so I stuck my vials of insulin in there. Now that pouch, when it's activated, is like almost 2 pounds.
Wow.
So, yeah. It's
so you're carrying a bit of extra stuff, but I'm listening to you talk about the various things you took with you. Mm-hmm. It strikes me that as long as you've got it all in one place and you know where to get it and how quickly to get it, it's a matter of discipline as much as anything else, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Just keeping an eye on what's going on. And apart from that, you kind of should be okay. So tell us about your diet then. So what were you able to eat when you were out on the trail then?
Well, the freedom the trail brings you as a diabetic is amazing.
Including Snickers?
Absolutely. Yes. That was the thing. Like hiking, especially hiking at the level that you do, like on any long distance trail. will bring this freedom for a diabetic. And at least this was true for me. Like I was hiker trash, so I was eating the hiker trash diet. I was
marvelous.
eating as many Snickers as I could. I was eating as many jumbo iced honey buns as I could, so there wasn't really any diet restrictions that held me back out there.
And so I understand, because I don't understand this really. So that's because you were managing it in the way in which you needed to manage it. So what you're inputting into your body, you were taking account of that with whatever your reading said. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, that makes a lot of sense, I guess, as well. And in those early days you're out there, did your body react very well on trail immediately? Because you said you'd noticed in the past you prospered out on the trail, as it were. Did you pretty early get into the right sort of rhythm that made you think quite early on, shit, I can do this?
Yeah. I felt pretty confident from a physical standpoint that I was going to be able to hike the Appalachian Trail. And from the mental standpoint, I felt pretty strong too, because I worked really hard to not over romanticize the trail. But there was still this, I wasn't sure like how my body was going to respond. Like I had never backpacked more than like 4 nights. So, doing this day after day, week after week, I wasn't sure like exactly what my body was going to respond. Like I didn't know how much insulin I would need and all this stuff. So you can plan however good you want, but until you get out there and do the thing, you don't really know. But I was very surprised. I got out there and on day 2, my body responded super well. It felt like I was meant to do it. Like it felt like natural to me to be out there and be hiking.
Wow.
I started getting great response to my blood sugar. I started having to back off my settings on my insulin pump on day 2. And I reduced my insulin, my daily units of insulin by like 2/3 of what I was using on a typical day back home.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's funny actually. This is my job, is to ask the dumb questions, because I really don't know the answers to this. But is there any way that one can walk off diabetes, or is this something that you can just feel better and improve your numbers, but you're never going to walk it off?
Yeah, as of now, for a type 1 diabetic, that would be a miracle to walk off type 1 diabetes, because there has not been a case where it's been reversed. Now, if you're a type 2 diabetic, yes, that could be more of a true statement. But for the type 1, it's kind of something you're always going to live with.
And did you meet other diabetics when you're out there? Because, how would one know one was a diabetic unless one actually said it? I mean, was this something that came up in conversation? You met, because I think you did meet one or maybe 2 others, didn't you?
Yeah, it was one of the coolest things that happened. So I met a fellow type 1 diabetic, Sugar J.
That's a cool name. That's a cool name.
Yeah, that's why I wanted a cool diabetes thing.
Yeah.
And I met him 4.5 miles in on the approach trail.
Nice.
And I ended up hiking with him for probably close to 700 miles.
Wow.
And it was just amazing. I thought I was going to be the only type 1 diabetic out there on trail this year. You just don't think about like it's something that a lot of diabetics are going to pursue. Although I knew that there was type 1 diabetics that have done it in the past, you just don't hear a lot about their stories.
Right.
And so I met him 4.5 miles in. I was blown away. I was like, this is so cool. And then, there's
tons of us out here.
Yeah.
The place is lousy with diabetics.
Yeah. And then we started hiking together from the NOC on, and we met another type 1 diabetic, Oates. She was out there hiking this year. Wow. And I don't know if she finished or not. She was way faster than what we were, but it was cool. There was 2 other type 1 diabetics I met out there.
And, because you've had to get there in a different way than the rest of us. You're still a hiker who happens to be a diabetic, really, more than anything else. And when you got to Katahdin, it must have been obviously super special for you to get up there. Did you climb it with the guy that's Sugar J or not?
I did not.
All right, okay.
Yeah, Sugar J ended up getting off trail right at mile 800.
Oh,
And that kind of changed my hike completely.
right.
We were kind of inseparable. It was really cool to have someone that knew the ins and outs of diabetes and have that support. And he was definitely the more the social, interactive one of the two. And so he got off at mile 800. Kind of changed my hike for about 3 weeks or so. I went back to hiking solo. And then, as luck would have it, I met up with 2 other ladies that I had met right around the Grayson Highlands area and started hiking with them. And then they told me that I can't leave them. And
There you go.
I ended up hiking with a group of 4 from about Vermont on.
Right.
Lunch break, Greyhound, and Suits were my tramley, and we summited Katahdin together, and it was amazing.
Very cool. Yeah. And when you touched the sign, you obviously, I'm sure you felt very accomplished because of what you've achieved there. And we all feel accomplished, I think, because we're hikers, not because you're diabetic. But I'm sure you felt that additional thing because you're diabetic. Were you glad it was over?
No.
Right.
I was definitely... I could have turned right around and ran it back. Like
Hey,
it was.
There you go. A lap of honor.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like it's just one of those things. Like I can't mimic how my body responded, like with the hiking, in everyday life here at home. The freedom that the trail brought me as a diabetic was just exhilarating. I didn't have to worry about being a diabetic out there. I could eat whatever I wanted. My body, I mean, your body's just burning through so many calories.
Sure.
You know, and it's especially for guys, you know, we can't, like, no matter how hard we try, we almost can't get enough calories out there.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so that was...
There aren't enough Snickers in the world.
Yeah, there wasn't. You know, and, you know, so that's freeing. That was very freeing because, like, when you don't have to worry about being a diabetic, it frees that bandwidth up in your mind to think about everything else that's more important that you really haven't been able to dedicate time towards.
Interesting. I wonder if you're, well, I'd not thought about that. That's an interesting idea. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You that freedom being on track, and because that's actually something to do with my next question, because you're probably more in tune with your body, or maybe just more aware of your body than a lot of us. Did you notice other benefits from hiking, or did the trip actually take a toll on your physical well-being? But from what you've just said, it probably didn't take a toll on your well-being. You just felt as good as you've ever felt.
Yeah, I felt the best. Leaving the trail, I felt like I was in the best shape of my life. I have no residual effects. I guess that's maybe rare for thru hikers.
Yeah.
I left with no injuries or residual effects that would keep me hobbling for days. I felt amazing. And, you know, I think in large part, I think type 1 probably played a benefit in my regard because I've dealt with that over the years. To me, I almost feel like the trail was hard. It definitely was hard, but I feel like type 1 is harder. You know,
Okay.
in the general scheme of things, I feel like managing type 1 24/7 is almost harder. So coming to the trail, like I had already experienced a lot of difficult things that I felt were harder in a maybe not physical sense, but like a mental sense.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Than what it was to overcome some of the things we dealt with out on the trail. So I feel like that
Gave you a perspective, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, your illness has given you a perspective. And funny enough, my last question is going to be about, I'm sure you're going to say yes to this, but how do you think a diabetic should think if they wanted to hike the 80 or any other long trail? Is yours the template, or do you think you could have benefited from a few tweaks along the way? Or are you just really happy with how your hike worked out, obviously, because you finished? But is what you've done a pretty good template for others to follow, do you think?
I mean, I think there's many ways that you can hike a long distance trail, and that's true whether you're a type 1 diabetic or not. And the way that I did it this year worked for me, and it worked well for me. But I feel like everyone's going to have their own kind of unique things that they're going to bring to the table.
Sure.
I feel like everyone has their own comfort level with the outdoors. So there's things, if I were to hike again, I would probably change a little bit. But I know for a lot of diabetics out there, they're going to be like, well, how do I deal with the financial side of things? Because that's a huge burden in itself. I was blessed. I had the money saved up, and I was able to get 6 months of supplies before I got on trail. That might not be the same for everyone out there, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, it is possible to hike this trail with type 1 diabetes. There's many ways to do it. I had the insulin pump. I also realized while I was on trail that I could give myself shots and not run my insulin pump at all, and just give myself shots and control my diabetes very well with shots. Sugar J had gotten
Great name.
some. There's a new insulin on the market that is inhaled, and that works really, really well for some people. And he had switched to that like right before he got off trail, and I think that was something that worked well for him. Sure. So there's many different ways that you can treat type 1 diabetes, and what I found was you don't need an insulin pump. You can do it the old school way with giving yourself shots. And so it's, I think, one of those things where you're going to have to, if it's something you're going to want to do, you're going to kind of have to learn what your tendencies are and what's comfortable for you, and then train as much as you can and like learn as much as you can around that. And, Well,
I know you're a big advocate for diabetics doing this, and I'm going to put a link to the show notes in your YouTube channel, because it does talk about how to manage that sort of thing and talk about the gear you sort of need as a diabetic. But look, I appreciate you, DJ, coming on the show and sharing this, because some people might be thinking there's no way I can ever do this. Well, they can, because you're the smiling example of being able to do it. But so I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about it.
Absolutely. Love to be here, Steve.
Okay, man. Take it easy, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
It's funny, how much we take for granted in our lives. And DJ has managed his illness while fulfilling a dream that many of us have. I never had to think about any of that, but as you could tell, by thoughtful planning and careful monitoring, DJ was able to make it work for him. I really knew nothing about type 1 diabetes, and I'm delighted that he was happy, eager even, to come and share with you all. Thanks as ever to our indispensable donors this past week. Our recurring donors, Anne Pickin, Sharon James, Sean Deadwiley, Emmanuel Bravo Ramos, Kevin Weidman, Brian Alsop, Gregory Gopner, Bruce Brinker, Jessica Diaz, and our in-house trail angel, the great Hugh Ekrath, while Michael Freed also contributed, adding, "I love your show. I'm listening to your most recent podcast and catching up with the older ones. I'm currently listening to your second AT through hike. I'm planning to hike the AT this year. You and your guests are inspirational." Thanks, Michael. "And when I get back from my UK hike, reach out again and we'll follow your progress on the AT." So really, this only happens because these people step up and help defray costs. So I'm always so grateful for their participation and always happy to see new donors on the list. Thanks to you all. Now, let's catch up with Jester and Austin. Here they are. We've got two friends of the podcast on the show today. Here is Julie Jester Gayhart and Austin Wallace. Hey guys, how's it going?
What's up?
Hey everybody, Mighty Blue. It's weird being back on.
There you go. But it's funny enough. I've been meaning to ask you, Austin, and you've probably told me before. What is your trail name, and have you got one?
I'm gonna. So Julie tried to give me a trail name that it just didn't quite stick. But my original trail name is Downwind.
Excellent. Why did you accept that?
Well, I can't, there's a story behind it, and obviously you could probably put two and two together there.
I'm watching that already.
I'll just say it fits. so I
Very
can't
nice
really say no.
I'm never hiking behind Austin. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
We got that one then, right? Now, you're on the show for a very specific reason about something that you've recently released, a movie. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But let's talk about what you guys have been doing since you actually started Jester Wallace Productions. What's the purpose behind it?
Well, I'll start, and then Austin, you just pick it, whatever. So Jester Wallace Productions, actually started while we were creating the film, the documentary for I Am the MST, which was an anniversary gift for the Mountains to Sea Trail. And while we were creating that film, I think we decided that we worked really well together, and we wanted a place to house, so to speak, our future endeavors. And along the way somewhere, we decided that we wanted to turn it into an LLC. So Jester Wallace Productions is actually an official business.
Ooh, how about that?
Yeah. So, and we have been going strong for about a year now. And I Am the MST, we consider that part of Jester Wallace Productions. And Austin, I am sure you want to add to that, because that was a really short version of how all this came together.
That was definitely the Reader's Digest version, but it definitely came from the I Am the MST project, because we decided to work on that project together, because I've got an amateur film background, just doing YouTube. And Julie's obviously got a very accomplished podcast. And so we kind of combined our forces on that project. And so she was the interviewer, I was the camera guy. And it really kind of just opened the door for both of us to realize that, hey, we work well together, and why don't we put a name on this?
Nice.
And so that's where it came from. And so that's kind of where we've developed together as creators in that respect, because it's been new country for both of us as far as like venturing into this.
I bet it's kind of daunting, but it's a space with a lot of room, though, isn't it? Really. And funnily enough, your new film is a good example of that. And I'm going to talk about that in just one moment. But I know you've teamed up with Wim Schalken at Hiker Metals as well. Is his involvement? Is there some commonality of interest between all of you?
I think so. We've known Wim a long time. And Mighty Blue, you certainly know Wim.
Yeah.
And when it was Austin's idea, when we started, when the idea for Safe and Found started, at the time we didn't even have a title for the film. We just knew that we wanted to do something centered around hiker safety. And we did not want a sponsorship. We wanted a partner. Someone that would be with us not only on the movie, but for everything we did in a year time frame. So Hiker Metals and Wim signed on for 2023 with everything that Jester Wallace Productions was doing. That's our live stream podcast. That was filming Safe and Found, and any shorter films or clips that we put out through the year. Wim was a partner with that. And we also wanted a company that not everybody was using. We wanted everything about this project to be unique. And nice. Wim has a unique project or a product, and we knew that this project was going to be unique as well. So that's kind of how we brought on Wim. And Austin says Wim is our friend, and that could be no more true. Austin, I know you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, Wim, obviously...
Hey, Austin, are you the expander? You Julie's expander.
I embellish. But no, Wim, Julie introduced Wim to me. But yeah, Wim as a person is just a fantastic individual. But he's also a hiker.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like us in that, Julie and I have day jobs that keep the lights on and the mics hot, as they say. And so does Wim. He's Hiker Metals is his brainchild, his baby. But he's also got a day job as well.
I didn't know that. I thought Hiker Metals was his entire thing. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so we kind of all identify with each other in that respect.
Sure,
and that, we've all got this passion for the outdoors. And in Julie and my case, we're trying to turn that passion into some type of business. Wim has definitely done that and made a successful business out of it. So in that respect, he kind of fit that niche of that beyond the trail, as we like to say.
Now, Julie just mentioned the name Safe and Found, which is a great name, by the way, because when people watch it, and we're going to give you a link later on about where to find it and so on, but I noticed in the credits at the end, Julie, you were credited with the idea or the thought of, because you've always talked about the 10 essentials and you can name them, which I can't. I think I can name one of them, but
Steve, do
one
not
essential is
admit
just
that.
turning up. It's just turning up. Were you just sitting at home or were you talking to Nancy? Because I know Nancy was a collaborator in this project as well.
No, it really started, the inception for this started back in 2016 when, and this, I'm going to make a really long story short, a family friend of ours, Chris Sherpa Fowler, went missing on the Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah. And him going missing, and he's still missing, he has never been found on the trail. And that impacted me greatly well before I even knew what the 10 essentials were. And I just made up my mind in 2016 that I was going to be a better hiker. And really what changed me was Chris's mother, Sally. The ramifications of not being a safe hiker and the impact on your family. And Sally is the one, his mother, who has really had to deal with, he's on the missing persons list. He has no death certificate. So as she says, when you go missing, it's messy. And that really hit home to me. And Sally knew nothing about hiking. I mean, she didn't even know where the PCT was, really. Her son was just out for what everybody goes out for, living their dream and going on a journey and hiking. And I just decided I'm just not going to do that. And I'm not going to make fun of people that do that anymore. And so skipping ahead to meeting Austin, and Austin and I have talked about the 10 essentials on the Jester show. And we just decided when we started the company that was kind of going to be our, I don't even know what you call it, our backbone, that, what we would promote as a company is being safe out on trail. And that's where it really started for me. And Nancy East comes in because Austin and I made a list of people that we would possibly want to work with. And we both knew that Nancy was into preventative search and rescue education. And I'm going to toss it over to Austin this time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how the idea for the film kind of evolved, because we walked into it with this idea that we were going to do something hiker safety related, and like you just said, Nancy was already knee deep in the education of that, and so Nancy, she's a great person, but very humble. For all of her accomplishments, she's a very humble person. So she got
the fastest known time for the 900 miles in the Smokies.
Yes,
amazing.
She has got quite the resume. Yeah. But she begrudgingly accepted our offer to be filmed, and so we showed up for kind of the first weekend of filming, and interviewed Nancy and interviewed a couple of folks from the search and rescue team.
Sure. And
when Julie and I walked away from that, we realized that we were stumbling into something much, much larger than just hiker safety.
Well, that was the thing. That's kind of why I asked the question, because how do you, I know you're safe yourself and you do the 10 essentials, but how do you know what questions to ask a group of people who put their lives on the line to help other people out? How do you know how to work those questions out? Because
that's all Julie.
It's not straightforward. It's not straightforward, is it? Really?
No.
So what was the process for you then, Julie?
We really started. And Austin and I are a team in everything that we do, and he and I would have conversations before we would meet, and 10 times out of 10, it was never that way. The conversation always took a turn. And when it came to Nancy, truly, it started off as more, and I don't mean this bad at all, like workshop style.
Right.
But when the guys came over, it was when they started unveiling why they wanted to be on search and rescue teams, and really what the team meant to them and the community around the team. And I think every single person that we interviewed said, if it was me and mine, I would want the best out there searching. And the questioning just kind of lended to itself. I just went off of the emotions that were coming out of each one of them as they were speaking. And, I would every once in a while turn around and look at Austin and say, is there anything else, that you could think of that we need to ask? And it was like, wow. And Austin, you would ask a couple more questions, but to me, I just let the individuals say what they wanted to say and then go from there. In other words, we did not, and we were asked by a media outlet if we had a script. There was no script. This changed on a weekly basis for us.
Well, some of these guys were ex-fire, ex-military, ex-fire. I see there's a fireman and ex-cops or cops as well, aren't they? So they're people who are selfless in their own lives anyway, in many ways. So they do things for other people, and that was striking to me straight away who these people were and how many people it takes to organise that sort of party. And of course, the Smokies. What a setting you had to film in as well. That was just amazing.
Right
now. And once again, I don't want to give it all away, but because I want you all to watch it, because I think it's well worth watching. It's broken down into, you speak about 3 different people, and you talk about the 3 different things that can go wrong: bad decisions, bad preparation, and bad luck. And I thought, how are they going to explain these things? And you start off with this lady, Susan Clements, who unfortunately lost her life eventually due to bad decisions. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching it, thinking, wow, how they clear that with the family. So what was that conversation like when you approached the family to get involved in this film?
That was probably the most daunting aspect of this whole thing for Julie and I, was approaching the Clements family. And Elizabeth Clements was the one. So she, when the whole search and ultimately the recovery was going on, Elizabeth actually posted YouTube videos of herself kind of talking through this whole process, because she already had kind of a YouTube following,
right?
Just doing like a travel channel and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so she bared her soul to the internet. And so that's what kind of gave us the idea that maybe she would be okay with us talking to her. Because Nancy East had also approached the entire Clements family when Nancy wrote her book.
And Nancy's such an empathetic person, isn't she?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so I can see how not so much it would draw them in to do it, but they would trust Nancy, and they didn't know you from Adam, So but I'm sure she said, these people are you can trust these people. And when I was listening to her speak, and she said at one stage, some people don't know the difference between a walk and a hike. That hit home to me, actually, quite strongly, because you had pictures of the Smokies, and we know how interminably lost you can get if you go anywhere off trail and so on. And she was talking about it, and she's obviously allowed herself to learn more about it as she's gone on. And I know that her death inspired Nancy to get into more sort of education and so on. And I've got to say, by the way, one of the things that I found very striking about the film were those incredible drawings. Those black and white drawings by, is it Sketching Summits? I've heard of heard the people. What was the idea, because you've got plenty of material to film in the Smokies, haven't you? But this was actually putting the people, and then the people would disappear from the cartoon as well as they went up the trail. So was that a technique, or, what was the idea behind that?
That is all Austin. Heidi Nisbett is, I knew Heidi, she's out of Charlotte, and I had met Heidi before. She used to do some events for Blue Blaze Brewing.
Right. And
Heidi's an AT thru hiker. She's hiked the Pinhoti Trail, and I've always loved her art. And I'm going to toss it over again to Austin, because Austin we knew we needed a digital artist or an artist. And we just didn't know how fantastic she was going to be.
Amazing. Just amazing pictures.
And Austin had this amazing idea that's way beyond my comprehension. So,
so I knew, we have these stories that we're trying to tell visually, because it's one thing nobody wants to watch an interview with a talking head for 45 minutes where that's the only thing you see is that person talking. So we knew we had to have that B-roll is the term, that footage that goes over the top. And you can only show so many beautiful smoky skylines.
And you showed a few, to be fair.
We showed a few, yes.
Yeah, which are beautiful.
But we were trying to tell this story visually. And so there were a few scenes that I knew, if you kind of go into documentary work, there's a couple of different ways to reenact things that have already happened in the past. One is to like have actors and try to act it out, which
I'm so glad you didn't do that. I'm so glad you didn't do that. Although there was a picture of Julie hiking down with Nancy, by the way.
I know. I was like, that was actually coming back from a major team ropes event.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I did strategically put in a cameo of both Julie and I. But yeah, so I knew that we were going to have to recreate some of these scenes. And so in my mind, I had thought like some of this like rough animation like you see sometimes.
Yeah.
But I was just like, man, that's like trying to convey the ideas that are in our heads, and especially to someone like if we were to hire an animator, like that may or may not have any vested interest in the concept.
Yes.
And so Julie and I, we were talking about it. We were at NC Trail Days in Elkin, ironically showing the I Am the MST film. And we had been talking the night before and then talking that day about, Safe and Found and trying to figure this out, solve these problems and kind of come up with the plot and the storyline and the whole works. And I was talking about this like, hey, we're going to have these gaps that we've got to fill somehow.
Sure.
And we're walking down the street in Elkin, and there's Heidi's booth. And so we were chatting with Heidi, and then as soon as we walked away, it was like, what if I don't remember if Julie said it or I think it was Julie.
Well, I already knew. I mean, I just knew you had to come along, Austin, but I was like, okay.
But what was awesome was she's like, we could use Heidi for those animations. And man, it was like it put my imagination into 10th gear. And that whole lunch, Alonda was out there with us, poor girl. She had to listen to us just brainstorm, and I was excited. Because I love Heidi's style, and what was awesome was that as we went through the edit and started identifying the scenes that we actually wanted for her to depict, like for instance, we call them the Snow Boys, is what they're affectionately called by the search team. But one of the bad preparation story,
Davy Crockett.
David Crockett.
Yeah, David Crockett. Yeah,
that's his real name.
I prefer Davy, but you carry on. King of the Wild Frontier.
Yep.
But they were stuck out in the snow and just frigid temperatures.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to convey that sense of I want whoever's watching this to be cold. I want their feet to be cold and so Heidi just took the ball and ran. We kind of gave her some left and right limits. And just she knocked it out of the park.
She did, and I tell you what she did for the film. For me, she gave it a sense of foreboding. Now you don't want to frighten people from being in the woods, and I'm sure people when they see it will be so gratified and grateful for the people who actually risk their lives to come and do this. But those pictures are very not grim, but they're foreboding, aren't they? And I like that part of it. I think that made it so interesting. And that long night in the snow, and those guys who were eventually rescued were there for 2 days, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. 2 nights.
Two nights. I meant 2 nights. Yeah, sorry, 2 nights. Yeah, and then they also said they got them. Well, that may be the other one. No, we'll talk about the other one in a minute. Come back to the preparations. Were you two aware before you started doing this the logistical challenges of doing this? Because I hadn't realised there were so many people involved, not just the rescuers, but also the coordinators and putting everything together and feeding people and so on. Were you aware of what it was like?
That kind of fell into our lap. Like I said, in that first weekend of filming, we ended up talking with Mike Street, who's the team director.
Right.
Because one of the ideas I had was like, hey, I'll keep all my stuff in the car ready to go. All you got to do is call me and I will come out. for a rescue. Like if you guys get a call out, like a real rescue, I want to come film it.
Oh, we were really pumping that up because, man, we just do
because I was like, that would be just golden footage.
Of course, yeah.
And Mike politely squashed that for a lot of logistic and legal reasons. It just wasn't going to be able to do that. But he's like, but we're doing this big exercise next month, this being like last March, where they were going to be doing the concept was that this event was going to be centered around a scenario in which they're on a search. It turns into a longer search, right. 3+ days. And so their idea was to bring in members of the Carolina Mountain Club who traditionally do all the trail maintenance, kind of in that Haywood County wilderness area, the Shining Rock Wilderness, and have them supplement search and rescue team members. And so the training event was the training audience was the CMC folks.
Sure.
And so they were split up into teams. But what was cool was, and I'm glad you brought it up because we talk about it in the film, the sexy side of search and rescue is out there in the woods or rappelling down from a helicopter or crossing a waterfall. But the real meat and potatoes of what makes all of that happen, the engine that keeps everything running, is that incident management team.
And that came across really strongly in the film, and I'm glad
they were serious. It was a serious thing.
And these guys sitting around chatting to each other as well about it. These are serious men and women, obviously, but there are 3 guys sitting around a table, and they take
the sheriff, the EMS former emergency management director, and Mike Street, who is the current director of the Haywood County Search and Rescue Team. That was actually phenomenal to get those 3 together. And
the last one was bad luck. This woman was totally prepared for literally everything. She knew about the 10 essentials. She had the 10 essentials. She knew what to do.
She did everything right.
She did everything right, and she broke a bloody leg. As I'm watching, I think, oh my God, what would you do? I mean, I wouldn't have known. And one of the things she said was, it's often not the risks you think of. People say be frightened of bears, whatever. Think about those things that just happen. And in her case, she got, is it Christine Bowman, I think it was?
Yep.
She just got a lot of bad luck. So that was the film talked about those 3 different points of how the search and rescue can happen for all those different reasons. As hikers, what was your biggest takeaways from the stories you were telling? What did you take away from it?
I became a much safer hiker. I like to think, because one of there were a couple of different points that we really tried to drive home. One was stay on trail and leave a plan. And that leave a plan meaning somebody that's not going to be on the hike needs to know where you are.
Yeah, Julie said that before. I've heard you say that before, Julie. Yeah. And I, of course, I don't tell anybody anything, but so I'm not the poster child for this thing. But seeing that made me realise. I was thinking of you, Julie, listening to it, because I know that's what you say, what you do, leave a plan, say where you're going to be, and they showed that the guys parked their car somewhere, and no one even knew where their car was parked.
Right.
So that, it's a good thing to think about, all those various lessons. What did you get from it then, Julie? What were your takeaways?
My main takeaway is the people that are on this Haywood County Search and Rescue Team, they, the sheriff makes a quote, they have a heart for service, and it's just this servitude, and it's something that you can't explain, and it's a passion. And it just amazes me that these individuals, they're ready 24/7 to go on a call where, Nancy on the team, she's known as the one that can just hike miles and miles and miles and miles and search. And, you have your ropes specialist, these guys that could go out and no matter what, put you in a harness and you're going to be safe. And then Christine talks about as soon as the guys got there, she felt safe and she knew that she was going to be taken care of. Yeah. So this total...
she relaxed. She wanted to fall asleep and they said she couldn't.
Yeah.
Right.
That was funny.
And in the beginning, my takeaway was, wow, these are all volunteers. This is all volunteer. And a lot of people, they don't think they are. They're volunteers, they're training, they're putting in hours and hours and hours of continuing education. And they just have this service attitude. And you have to have it or you can't do it.
I'm sure.
You can't be like 1 foot almost in. You have to be all in. And the very next day after we had the premiere this past Sunday, they were going out to do ice training on a waterfall.
They were literally getting up the next morning, and they were going to go ice climbing because it had been super cold, and so the ice had finally gotten to a safe point, I guess. But yeah, they never stop. Like they just have that internal drive.
And I do want to say one thing real quick, and I've said this before. I truly, truly believe in the depths of my soul that hiker safety should be out there as much as leave no trace. Actually, in my mind, if you had to rank them as important,
I agree.
It's hiker safety is your life, and it's other people's lives when you. The number one thing of, the 7 principles, plan ahead and prepare.
Yeah.
Of leave no trace. So it should be out there and it should be taken seriously. And a lot of people, and I was that hiker prior to 2016, whatever, leave me alone. I'm going out in the woods and have my experience.
That does sound like you, by the way, Julie.
Well, what's interesting, there's so many just golden quotes that we were able to put in there, but one of them came from David, that was rescued in the snow. And he was talking about his first phone call that he made. And the story is that they were out on a day hike. They got lost.
Yeah.
They ended up staying overnight, and then they didn't call 911 or anyone until the following day. Yeah. And so his first call was to one of his friends, and he's like, well, we're lost. And she's like, what do you mean you're lost? And his response was, well, we went out on a day hike, and that was yesterday. And that just resonated, because, and even with the Susan Clements search, or her story, they were at Klingman's Dome, which Klingman's Dome is about as close to Disney World as far as the Smokies go. Yeah. It's a wide paved path all the way up to the tower.
Yeah. Terrible.
And she still got lost in that area. Yeah. Still got off trail and ended up
and at one
dying.
point she was on the AT going south.
Yes, amazing. Yeah. And she split up with her daughter.
And that happens because when every time that story comes out, I think about me hiking with my dad in Maine, and he and I split up. Just you're just hiking, and you may get ahead of each other, or behind each other. Mighty Blue, you and I hiking. You get up, somebody gets in front of you, and you would think, hey, go ahead and go up to the tower. That's not supposed to be a big deal.
Yeah. Funnily enough, my takeaway was exactly what you said, Julie, the selfless nature of these rescuers. I thought it was, frankly, I was kind of shocked and felt almost embarrassed about my attitude, to be honest with you. I mean, these guys, someone said, if I've got a ticket for a movie, I may be seeing the movie, maybe I won't. If I get a phone call, I'm not going to see the movie. So, right. That's part of that culture, which is so admirable, and they do it all the time. And also, I think it was Nancy who referred to call 911 as your first call. That was interesting. I never would have thought of it. I would have thought to ring someone, but it wouldn't be 911. And the other thing, one last thing I was going to say, it was a great argument for a Garmin. In fact, I think Nancy had one of those up as well, didn't she? So it was a great argument for having that thing of where someone's going to know where you are. So I've got to tell you guys, I thought it was terrific. Really well done, Austin. You're a bloody genius. I watched some of our Woods Hole weekend films. How you did those was amazing to me. So that must have taken millions of hours. But this was really quite something. So where can people watch it then?
On the Jester Wallace Productions YouTube channel. Okay. If you just Google Safe and Found, you'll see it in our results.
Cool.
And you'll see Heidi's beautiful artwork as the thumbnail. Nice. And it should be pretty easy to spot. But yeah, it's under the Jester Wallace Productions YouTube page, and it's free to the world.
Well, I strongly advise everybody who listens to this to go out and watch it. It's not only well done, it's an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener for me, and I'm pretty slack on everything. But, I think I was kind of shocked how this resonated with me. So I'm sure anybody, especially hiking this year, if you're going out there, this is not you shouldn't be afraid to go out there, but you should know what you're letting yourself in for. So I think everybody should watch it. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes. So thanks you guys for coming on and sharing the story. And thanks for doing the film. And Nancy, of course, as well. And all the guys who were involved. So appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Cheers then. I tell you, that film really brought home to me the importance of those 10 essentials, and particularly leaving your plan with somebody. As I said, I highly recommend it to you, whether you're experienced or a newbie. Everybody will take something away from it. And those drawings, they are awesome. I'll add links in the show notes to lead you directly to the film. Check it out. You're welcome. So that's it for another week. I wouldn't want anybody to be frightened by the thought of being in the woods, but just being sensible and just taking the right sort of precautions can make your experience so much better if things do go a little bit wrong. I'll see you next week.